Hey, dear ones! As always, take what resonate and leave what does not, okay? I'm going to talk about GESARA and NESARA. GESARA stands for Global Economic Security and Reformation Act, and NESARA stands for National Economic Security and Recovery Act. I discussed this a couple years ago, maybe back in 2021, 2022, around that time frame. But a lot of you are awake now. You must have heard this by now, but if not, I wanted to give you a short and brief history overview, because I feel that we are very, very close to seeing this in our physical reality. All right, so this is the history of the NESARA law for the United States. NESARA was signed into law by President Clinton in 2000 at gunpoint because the military forced him to sign it. He wasn't going to, and was to be announced by Alan Greenspan on 9/11/2001 at 10 a.m. This was prevented by the destruction of the World Trade Center by then George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, and Donald Rumsfeld, and others involved with this great deception. So they murdered 7,000 innocent Americans that day and stole billions of gold and silver from Building 7. In early 1993, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled on charges by the Farmers Union that banks in the U.S. were fraudulently foreclosing on farm mortgages, and that the U.S. government was in collusion with these banks. The testimony and proof brought into court by retired CIA led to further evidence and proof that Farmers Union claims were legitimate. It also led to evidence that the 16th Amendment, the Income Tax Amendment, was never properly ratified by the required number of states, and therefore declared that income taxes were unlawful. All right? So almost unanimously, the U.S. Supreme Court justices ruled in favor of Farmers Union. Now, the justices recognized that overwhelming evidence proved the U.S. government and the Federal Reserve banking system were perpetrating fraud in many ways upon Americans. So the justices recognized that to remedy this situation, massive reformations would be required. So when rulings were made by the U.S. Supreme Court, one or more of the justices are assigned to monitor the process by which rulings are carried out. So in this case, 5 of the justices were assigned to a committee to develop steps to implement the required governmental and banking reformations. As the justices were about developing the changes, they enlisted the help of experts in economics, monetary systems, banking, constitutional law, and other areas. They built coalitions of support and assistance with thousands of people worldwide working to bring NESARA and GESARA into fruition. These people were called the White Knights. The term White Knights was borrowed from the world of big business when a vulnerable company is rescued from a hostile takeover. So because of the enormously sweeping changes, the rulings by the U.S. Supreme Court required an extremely strict gag order was put in place on everyone involved. The justices also sealed all records on the case until after the reformations are all accomplished. So to maintain secrecy, the case details for the docket number assigned to the Farmers Union case were changed. So doing a research for this case will fail to reflect the correct information until after the reformations are made public. At every step of the process, anyone directly involved has been required to sign an NDA, non-disclosure agreement, to keep the process of implementing that required information secret or face charges of treason, which are punishable by death. So, to implement the reformations, the 5 justices spent years negotiating how the reformations would occur in agreements called accords with the U.S. government, with Federal Reserve Bank owners, the IMF, World Bank, and numerous countries including the UK and the EU. The reformations required the Federal Reserve Bank system to absorb by the U.S. Treasury and all fraudulent banking activities to be stopped, as well as remedies to Americans for past harm due to fraud. The U.S. banking reformations will impact the entire world, and therefore the IMF, World Bank, and other countries, including the UK and the Vatican City. Members of Congress were ordered by the U.S. Supreme Court to deny the existence of NESARA GESARA or face charges of treason, punishable by death. Some members of Congress were charged with obstruction and threatened with charges of treason. Therefore, all members of U.S. Congress have had to pretend that NESARA GESARA has not been passed in order to comply with the justice's gag order. All right, now you know the history of NESARA GESARA.